Welcome, Gunrunner.
Over the last couple of months, I've made follow-ups to my videos on 5 failed consoles that never made it out of Japan, as well as 5 failed consoles that never made it out of America, where I revealed the stories behind more obscure systems from these continents, and I think you probably all suspected I would also follow up one of the other videos I did in that series, which looked at consoles that never made it out of Europe. Like the aforementioned follow-ups, my research for the original episode saw me come up with more than enough candidates for just one video, so that's why I'm back with 5 more for you. These are all consoles that released in different parts of Europe that failed so badly they never made it out of the region, despite plans to market them worldwide. In fact, I'd actually say that some of the consoles featured in this follow-up video are even bigger failures than the ones from the first episode, and probably even more obscure in many cases too. So I'm sure that there are going to be a lot of interesting facts in these stories for all of you, especially those of you who love me covering the really obscure stuff. But I don't want to go on too long in this intro because the stories here will very much speak for themselves. So let's get going with the main feature, shall we?
The new Interton Ready delivers more hearing with less effort. They are easy to use, and with Made for Apple and the new Interton Sound app, clients can enjoy a personalized hearing experience and personal control in any situation. With the TV streamer, clients can stream sound from the TV directly into their hearing aids. So, if you are looking for a hearing aid that delivers more hearing with less effort, join the new Interton family and put the smile back in your client's ears.
This entry is somewhat complicated because at least 20 different manufacturers across the world produced their own variations of the 1292 Advanced Programmable Video System, with the vast majority of these originating in Europe and other PAL regions. Although they all followed the same basic design internally, thought to have been originally created by obscure Dutch company Audiosonic in 1977, they all had their own individual case designs. This is a very important thing to note because this also meant, rather bizarrely, that each machine also had its own cartridge slot and cartridges, meaning that despite using identical hardware, games from one version of the Advanced Programmable Video System couldn't necessarily be played on another. Now imagine if different MSX computers or PC compatibles couldn't use the software from another manufacturer. That would be really stupid, right? Well, that's what this is. So because of this, I really could have included any of the European made models of the APVS, but the reason I chose the Interton VC 4000 in particular is that it's also a follow-up to another European-only console, the VC 2000, so this entry is very much 2 for the price of 1. But whereas the VC 2000 was basically just a simple Pong clone that changed to different variations of the game when you swapped out the cartridge, a design somewhat similar to the original Magnavox Odyssey in fact, with the cartridges just acting as circuits that changed the game variation rather than containing code on a ROM chip like proper consoles, its successor the VC 4000 was very much a proper console that used ROM cartridges just like the Atari 2600 and Fairchild Channel F. Although the VC 2000 was a pretty basic system, it had a very cool case design and was popular enough in its home country of Germany to persuade hearing aid manufacturer Interton to have another go. Released in 1978, the Interton VC 4000 is based around an 8-bit Signetics 2650 AI CPU at 4.43 MHz, with a rudimentary graphics chip capable of displaying 8 colours, 4 sprites and some simple playfield graphics. I know I already mentioned it's part of the APVS family, but it's undoubtedly the best known and most widely distributed version of the console, mainly due to its popularity in Germany, but it was also distributed in parts of France and the Netherlands too. It also has the most games, with over 50 VC4000 branded cartridges out there. Interton's console came in a very slick looking black case with two hardwired controllers that both feature a 12-button keypad. It was priced at a very reasonable 298 Deutschmarks, which equates to just under €400 in today's money, or around £350, $450. So perhaps it's a bit unfair to class the Interton VC4000 as a failed console, but it's certainly not well known outside of its homeland, and the cartridge incompatibility between the various APVS machines certainly didn't help their success, and just created a lot of confusion amongst consumers. So I'd say it's done enough to qualify for a placement in this list. I thought it was best to start this video off with a more well-known console before I went into the really obscure stuff, which is where we're heading now. But don't skip this one because it's a really interesting entry, especially from a historical perspective, as the Philips Tele-Spel was the earliest cartridge-based console to originate from Europe and is also the official follow-up to the Magnavox Odyssey. And this is because Dutch-based Philips Electronics acquired the American brand and all its products in 1974, with this coming out 3 years before the Odyssey 2 and Video Pack. Launched in 1985 across most of Western Europe, where it was also known as the Tele-Spel, Tele-Pelli and Las Vegas, depending on your region, the Tele-Spiel, which directly translates to Tele Game, consists of a very small console, 2 controllers and a cable to connect the cartridges. This is a very unique design indeed, as I can't think of another console that uses this kind of setup. The main unit simply contains counters to record the score for each game, as there is no on-screen scoring, and a slot for storing a game cartridge, which Philips actually called cassettes. Then you have the 2 controllers, which feature similar slide shifters, but this time they have potentiometers behind them to control the on-screen objects. This is extremely unique for a console of this era, which usually used rotatable paddles or knobs. These controllers have a cable that plugs directly into the cartridge, which contains everything needed to actually play the game, rather than the console itself, which is only used to record the scoring. There are just 5 games produced for the Tele-Spel, and each cartridge contains a small circuit board with discrete components that enable the necessary graphics needed for the game, as well as sound and various events such as collisions. Although later Tele-Spel models used the famous General Instruments AY3 8550 processor, often referred to as the Pong chip, to display the games instead. The 5 games consisted of badminton, skeet shooting, racing, ghost chaser and pelota. Although it was kind of revolutionary for the time, the Tele-Spel was simply far too expensive to ever achieve any kind of mainstream success. It cost the equivalent of €60 in 1975, which equates to just over €330 in today's money, which is nearly £285 or about $363. This is quite a bit more than a dedicated Pong console of the time, which played much the same games without the need to purchase additional ones, making it a much better buy. Now the next console on our list is by far the weirdest one I've ever come across. I mean, I've seen some pretty strange consoles over the years, like the Nichi Bitsu MyVision, which was designed to play simple board games for example, or the LJN Video Art that was designed as a plug-and-play version of MS Paint, but this is by far the strangest one of the lot, and even after doing extensive research, I still can't work out why this thing exists, or why anyone thought it was a good idea. Released in 1985, it was far from the first video game system to be released by the UK's national broadcaster, as they had previously teamed up with Acorn Computers to create the hugely popular BBC Micro range, of course. But this was their only ever console, and one that wasn't designed with kids in mind, as it was squarely aimed at adults, older ones in particular, with a penchant for the popular card game of bridge. Created by maths teacher Andrew Cambites for Unicard Limited, he wanted to generate income from bridge due to his love for the game, and when he combined this with his other passion, computer programming, the Bridge Companion seemed like the perfect solution. He then managed to sell this idea to the BBC, who already had a popular TV show dedicated to bridge that also televised national tournaments. There were plans to integrate the console into their programming, as they had done with the BBC Micro before. but this never really happened, probably due to the incredibly lukewarm reception to the console. The unit itself features a series of buttons used to control each program, it's probably a stretch to call them games, and a cartridge slot on the back. There were 9 cartridges produced for the Bridge Companion, with each focused on a different aspect of the game. These included Advanced Bidding, Advanced Defense, Bridge Builder, Club Play 1, Club Play 2, Club Play 3, Conventions 1, Duplicate 1 and Master Play 1. As you can tell by the numerical names on some cartridges, more were planned but never actually released. What is really interesting, however, is that a small section of the modern day homebrew community have embraced the BBC console and created a series of demos and games that better show its abilities. And speaking of those abilities, I'm betting that you'd like to know what's actually inside. Well, I can tell you that it's pretty similar to the ColecoVision in many regards, with a Zilog Z80 CPU, 2K of RAM, and a Texas Instruments video chip. More than capable enough to play simple card games and the such like, and probably more capable than it would lead you to believe if those modern homebrews are anything to go by. I really don't think I need to explain why this one never made it out of the UK, let alone the continent of Europe, as the appeal of Bridge is extremely limited. But I also want to mention that the £200 retail price, not far off £800 in today's money, was also a significant factor in its failure. What on earth were the BBC thinking? Now, those of you who watched my original video on consoles that never made it out of Europe might remember that one of the systems I included was the Intercompex Hobbit, an obscure ZX Spectrum-based console from Russia. Well, if that story tickled your fancy, then you might be interested to hear that the Hobbit isn't the only such console from the former Soviet Union, as there is another that originates from Belarus called the ALF TV Game. Although it was also ZX Spectrum based, this machine makes use of proper cartridges, as opposed to cassette tapes like the Hobbit, with no way to upgrade it into a fully fledged computer. No doubt trying to copy that well-known Russian Famiclone, the Dendy, it also came with 2 Nintendo-style joypads and had its own mascot in ALF. Albeit unofficially, as I think it's pretty obvious they never acquired the rights to use the cat-eating alien on their packaging. But what is more interesting for me is the confusion around this branding, because it seems that this console is also known as the ALF TV Game, and when I previously covered this console on the channel, it was suggested by several native Russian speakers that the ALF console was in fact named the ALF, and it was a mistranslation from the Cyrillic alphabet. This case is actually backed up by early versions of the console that show a logo depicting a little man running away from a dragon, very reminiscent of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, both of which of course feature elves. However, this theory was soon rubbished by several other native Russian speakers who assured me it was definitely named the ALF, and this also fitted with my original observation that the font used on the logo was near identical to the one used in the ALF TV program, which was hugely popular around the time this console was released, not to mention the appearance of the character on later versions of the console. These same people also made me aware of a very cool website called zxbyte.ru, which contains a dedicated section on the ALF TV game where you can find tons of high quality photos, schematics, pictures of the motherboard, software downloads, ROM disassembly, cartridge layouts and so much more. I was honestly blown away by the wealth of information available there. It's truly staggering, and it really helps lift the lid on this oddity. From here I also discovered that the company that produced the ALF TV game was called OJSC Tvestatron, and is still going to this very day, producing all sorts of manufactured electronics. I didn't find any mention of the ALF on their website though, sadly. For those interested in discovering more about the ALF and its range of specific cartridges, which each feature several games that are translated into the Russian language and remove the need for keyboard presses, there is a Hyperspin theme you can use for emulation, along with all the modified Russian language ROMs that were created for it. Fascinating, I'm sure you'll agree. Based on the encouraging success of the Videopack G7000 and its rebranded North American sibling, the Magnavox Odyssey 2, Philips started working on a follow-up console almost immediately that was due to be released in 1983. This next generation video pack console will not only be backwards compatible with the original model, but would also feature state-of-the-art, well for the time anyway, hardware with high resolution backgrounds and sprites, as well as a host of other new features. This console would be called the VideoPack G7400 in Europe, and unsurprisingly the Magnavox Odyssey 3 in North America. Rather than a completely new console, like their biggest rivals Atari had produced with the 5200 Super System, the G7400 was merely an upgraded version of the original hardware. A good modern comparison to this would be the Xbox One X, which retained full backwards compatibility whilst offering graphical enhancements on compatible games. Philips' console would be very much the same thing, with games detecting which chipset was present and adjusting accordingly. Very ahead of its time, I'm sure you'll agree. So what about these hardware improvements then? Well, firstly there was an upgraded CPU that ran at around 3 times the speed, considerably more RAM, proper sound, a new high resolution graphics mode, and the ability to turn it into a fully fledged home computer with Microsoft Basic to program your own games. This certainly made it a lot more capable than both the Atari 2600 and Mattel Television in most areas, but still rather lacking when put up against the other new consoles of 1983 like the aforementioned Atari 5200 and ColecoVision. Anyone who knows their video game history will be well aware of something else much bigger that happened in 1983, the North American video game crash. This decimated the market for consoles and games in Magnavox's home territory, and the Odyssey 2 very much became one of the first casualties of that. However, over in Europe, VideoPack sales were still going strong for Philips, so they decided to plough on regardless, concentrating all support for the system on their own territory. Despite the large market share, sales of the G7400 were very disappointing indeed, as most Europeans began to move on to cheap home computers like the Sinclair ZX Spectrum and Commodore 64. This meant that just 3 G7400 specific games were ever released in Trans-American Rally, Norseman and Helicopter Rescue, with a further 6 re-release titles that were enhanced when played on the new machine in the form of Terrorhawks, Race, Stone Sling, Satellite Attack, Freedom Fighters and Pickaxe Pete. Another game called Flashpoint was due to be bundled with the North American Odyssey 3 console and was shown off to the press several times, but for some unknown reason it never made it over to Europe. This has thankfully since been recovered and released on cartridge in more recent years. If you want to know more about the story of the American Odyssey 3 variation in particular, then follow the link down in the description, as I've actually done a whole video on that very subject.
Hi Space Kids, Star Pilot Phillips here.
And Cosmo.
With our Philips VideoPack TV Game computer.
Check Star Pilot, but the Philips VideoPack isn't just the zappiest video games, it also makes music.
Real computer training.
And a real keyboard, real controls.
Cosmo, this Philips VideoPack is so advanced, it's frightening.
That's because it's got the mind of a computer and the thrills of a Star Pilot.
Cosmo, Philips want you to have the best.
And that rounds up my look at 5 more failed consoles that never made it out of Europe. Did you own one of these duds back in the day and want to share your experiences, or are you sad that one of these never actually made it to your homeland? I always love to hear the thoughts and views of my audience, so please get typing in that comment section. Before I go though, I must thank all of my loyal patrons and YouTube backers for continuing to support my channel and make videos like this possible. However, I must give special thanks to the following people in particular for their much appreciated pledges: Paul Daniel, Mins, Dos Gamerman, Luke MC, Carl Olsen, Seth Robinson, Frosty, Mark Strickland, Kalimatorn, Trogdor the Burninator, Daniel Skronsky, Ben P. Stein, Tabby Kitsune, David Maddox, Your Eyes Are Bleeding, Joe Casara, Classic Gamer 74, Bernard Santu, Peter Grantham, Noah Man, and Electron Star Collapse. If you also want to help support all my creative endeavours, including this YouTube channel, then please go and check out my Patreon right now, where you can get access to host extra content including downloads, exclusive videos, creative insights and much more besides. I've been the Laird, I thank you for watching and I'll see you all again for another video very soon.